Dear participants, allow me to greet the Prague European Summit from a distance. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has fundamentally changed the geopolitical landscape in Europe, and its many fallouts are felt well beyond Europe. For instance, higher commodity and energy prices, as well as uncertainty in supply chains, are further worsening the crisis of the global markets. Energy prices and supply shortages put pressure on our economy and threaten the energy security in the EU and our neighborhood. This is the other war that President Putin is waging, his war on energy. This is why, based on the direction set by EU leaders, the Commission has put forward measures to address the energy crisis, covering supply, demand, as well as price volatility. They are based on solidarity between neighbors, and there is also support to member states to accelerate the deployment of renewable energies. In the end, it will be our solidarity with Ukraine and with one another, our resilience rooted in our hope of a common vision for the future, that will defeat violence and fear and thwart territorial ambitions. Since the start of the war, our priority has been to respond to emergency needs in Ukraine, Moldova and beyond. So far, the EU and its member states have mobilized over 19 billion euro of support for Ukraine, and we will continue to stand with them. Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia have been given a European perspective by the European Council. Ukraine and Moldova were also granted candidate country status, and Albania and North Macedonia formally opened accession negotiations with the EU in July. The Commission has also recently recommended granting candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina. These are important political milestones for the future of the EU. The perspective of EU membership is a strong anchor, not only for prosperity, but also for peace and security, and concrete support measures have been activated. We are working on an energy rescue package for the entire Western Balkans. We plan to offer 1 billion euro in EU grants, which should lead to investments of 2.5 billion euro. With the Repower EU plan, the EU will keep working to phase out Russian energy imports while accelerating a green and just energy transition. This includes our closest neighbors, the Western Balkans, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, who were invited to work together on the voluntary common purchase of gas, LNG and hydrogen. The faster we move away from fossil fuels, the more secure our energy is, the more competitive we will become, and we will also have a cleaner environment which benefits our health. Renewables are our best shot to build a sovereign and sustainable energy made in Europe. Together with good governance and overall socio-economic stability, democracy and the rule of law are the fundamentals of the enlargement process. It is progress made on the fundamentals that determines the overall pace of negotiations. This is not an abstract or formalistic approach. It simply reflects the fact that without those values being respected, nothing else works. The rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights are the foundations on which the European Union is based and an essential part of our identity. They are what distinguish us from other forms of government, such as Putin's criminal regime. We cannot compromise on these values, and this is why we work closely with the enlargement countries to address shortcomings for the sake of their citizens and our own. In all these areas, genuine political will is essential. We are fully committed to supporting our partners who are ready to engage in profound and meaningful reforms. Accountable governments and democratic institutions are crucial not only for the EU accession process, but also to ensure long-lasting change, including when it comes to the green transition. This is why the EU will continue to support our partners all the way. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank Ms. Jourová for her video message and for her very strong statement related to the war in Ukraine and also the need for the green and digital transformation that is happening right now in Europe. I am also glad that we have the second keynote address speaker. I am very happy that we can welcome here in Prague Mr. Naser Nuredini, Minister of Environment and Physical Planning of North Macedonia. I can say that Mr. Nuredini, before he joined the government, worked as an analyst and also as investment manager. So he was dealing with the green economy and green investments in practice. So I think that his insights and his expertise will be also great for us to hear his experience and his thoughts about the green economy and about the future of Europe. So I would like to ask Mr. Nuredini to join me here on the stage and to present us his keynote address. Please.
Excuse me. Good morning to everybody. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you for inviting me to the European Prague Summit. I will try and keep my keynote speech a bit shorter. I know it's early in the morning. You probably don't want to hear the usual speeches that we get on these events. I actually just came back from COP27 in Egypt. Well, actually in Sharm el-Sheikh, to put it more open, which is called a charming Sharm, which is a lot warmer than it's here. And we're doing the annual speeches there. We have the annual promises. I've done this for the third time now in my career. I've been a Minister of Environment of North Macedonia for the last three years and a few months. And sadly, I have to say, we get to hear the same speeches often over and over again. The time is now, it is late, we should have done it, we should be somewhere else. Unfortunately, and we also hear comments from people speaking about the mistakes done in the past, that it's not our fault, the legislation in the past wasn't right, the legislation isn't right today, and it's difficult to change. And we are the ministers today, or we are the legislation, the people proposing the changes. The reality is, if we don't make the changes today, if we don't just say this is the status quo, then we will continue pushing the ball to the next generation, to a lot of young people that are here today. So that means this is the status quo. We either act, or the next generation of politicians will say the same thing. It is now. We will hear the Director General, Guterres, saying, well, the way to hell. I think that was his words that he used in COP. I think we're already there. In the 70s, everybody was speaking about the climate change. That's 50 years ago. Today, we're still speaking about greening the economy. We are still thinking about how we're going to go renewable, carbon neutral, and how we're going to achieve that to create a better future for our children. The reality is that train has already left. We used to speak about mitigation in between. Today, we're speaking about adaptation. Because we finally realize that things have changed, we need to adapt. We need to adapt to forest fires. We need to adapt to flash floods. Surprisingly, I'm going to tell you something which is shocking. A week ago, we had forest fires in North Macedonia in November. It was 25 degrees. So it is pure adaptation. So the key challenges we're all facing is, first of all, we had the pandemic a few years ago, and still ongoing, unfortunately. I think we learned a few lessons out of that. We learned that we're too dependent on certain sources. Our supply chains are very long. We were relying on food, products from across the world. We realized that the transport wasn't working anymore. We had actually food scarcities in some European countries even, in mine, for example, where we actually got support from our neighbors. Then, unfortunately, we have the horrible war in Ukraine. The loss of life, to start off with, is the worst thing ever. Then the effects that's having on all the countries in Europe is on a multitude that we never expected. And sadly, I think from the pandemic, we didn't learn much, apart from maybe, supposedly, we hear some speeches that in the European Union, decisions are made quicker now, which is good. But we all knew that we were really dependent on Russian gas. We as a country, we're 100% dependent on Russian gas. Unfortunately, we only have one interconnector with our neighbor, Bulgaria. Recently, we changed the agreement where we can actually import non-Russian gas as well, which wasn't possible before. We're investing heavily. We're investing in an interconnector with Greece, which will give us a different source. However, though, the key is that I know we're speaking about Repower EU, Repower Europe. Reality is 40% of the gas that we currently source is Russian. That's 150 billion cubic meters, plus minus or more a year. We're all speaking about new gas pipelines. These take time, and this will take a lot of time. All of us are relying on Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan currently has only a 10 billion cubic meter gas pipeline to Europe. They're going to build another one, which is another 10 billion. So we need to actually try and move forward as soon as possible when it comes to renewable energy. However, though, one challenge we faced, for example, as a country is we're investing in renewable energy. However, though, it's not constant. Something we don't actually all speak, or not many of us speak about. It's not a constant, unfortunately. It depends on the season, depends on the time of the day. Solar is great. We're all investing in it. But we need a balancing act. We need something to balance it. We need a storage facility. So when it comes to the Western Balkan countries, and I hope my dear neighbors don't mind me speaking in their name, we are investing in solar, we are investing in wind power, but the key is we need to invest either in large hydropower plants, which are going to balance the grid, or we need to look for a storage facility. That is hydrogen, green hydrogen. It's expensive though. Because we as a country, we're being very ambitious. Our enhanced NDC to the Paris Agreement has a very ambitious, better said, of decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions by 51%, which is not 55, as the EU is aiming for, but we're aiming for 51. And that is very ambitious for us. It's the highest target anywhere in the Western Balkans. And we're actually very optimistic that we're going to achieve that. We have got a strategy in place and we will. However, we shouldn't be measured. And I think certain countries in Central Europe, who used to be part of the Eastern Bloc, understand that certain that we cannot be measured to the standards of Western European countries. We, unfortunately, used to be under communist or semi-communist rule. Our industry did not develop the way the Western European countries did. So we're a few decades behind. The Western European countries have been industrialized for over 100 years. Well, I've been in the process of that. We're literally doing it now. And the Western Balkans, in the meantime, unfortunately, we had wars. So we know how it feels like and what is going on in Ukraine. So what we're saying is, it's not just about the money, but it's about the technology. What we're asking for, actually, what I would like to appeal to, is we need the support and the access to the technology to be able to fulfill our ambitions of the green transition. And that is only going to happen if Europe supports also the developing countries and the candidate countries from the Western Balkan 6 and anyone else. Because trust me, we've tried for the last 17 years to become an EU member. And only this year, July, did we get the date to actually start the accession talks. So we are on the path. We are on the right way. We're all in it together. It was mentioned yesterday. I think Europe only produces approximately between 7 to 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally. But the ramifications, not just in my country or our region, which is very prone to the freak weather events, we need to be thinking about the other parts of the world. Africa, where desertification is happening every day. It's obliging people to move. However, though, the opportunities are great to invest and create not only regional, but create new partners for energy sources across the world in our regions. And I'm happy that Mr. Bushel is here from the energy community, who's supporting us to try and create little micro, regional, when I say micro, I'm speaking about the Western Balkans, energy strategies that will make it sustainable for the future and won't let such events, and hopefully there are no such events in the future, but they won't let such events in the future impact us as dearly as it is impacting us now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you much, Mr. Minister, for this great speech.